There's a lot of really cool intelligence and cool backup related stuff. That's cool. Who cares? How about restore?
Great.
Any really cool game changer stuff around the world of restore that, because everything will do a backup, but backups are great. It's when we do the restore that our jobs are on the line.
Sure. So let me clean off the whiteboard yet again, and let's talk through what we can actually execute on here. And hopefully you guys are starting to see how these building blocks, with how we're managing, great backups, more technology and orchestration, and how it helps drive that whole lifecycle conversation we've been, starting this afternoon off with. So, restoration. Let's first talk about live file recovery, okay? So, I have a VM. VM's living inside of this ESX server. I have driven a snapshot off of that data store. And so I have that VM that lives right here. Now, I want to be able to grab a file directly from that point in time in the snapshot and put it right back to my VM guest. How do I do it? In our GUI, all we need to do here is perform what we call the live file recovery. The great part about this is, and again, this can live in the snap still, or it could have been backed up through our media agent and our VSA and live off on backup to disk. We can do the same thing here. But we basically have a VMware appliance that allows us to ensure file level recovery. Windows, again, is VADP, VDDK table stakes, right? As is ext2, ext3, ext4. But what about all those other file systems? We've built an appliance, work inside VMware, that will allow us to take that data from the snapshot, RiserFS, XFS, even any of the Unix operating systems, and ensure that we can pull back a single file that lives inside of that snap or in that actual virtual machine image that we have in our content store, and replay that file directly back to the live VM.
Overwrite or redirect?
Both.
Okay.
Rename, overwrite, redirect, whatever you want to do, right? All on the fly. That's important because, again, customers are using more and more Linux inside of hypervisors. We need parity across all file systems. We didn't just want to do what everyone else was doing and follow that basic VDK standard. We wanted to open it up so we can provide that live file recovery. In the instance it's coming from a snapshot, what we end up doing here, we mount this snapshot, register that VM that's inside that snap, and we actually crack it open, find the file, and restore it inside the actual hypervisor infrastructure.
What kind of files does that include? Things like special devices? Does it include symlinks, stuff like that, or is it just the target?
So we could do a symlink. We could do anything that shows up as an actual file object on that virtual machine.
Just pretty much anything.
Pretty much, yeah. Mm-hmm. Now the gotcha there is, from this perspective, pretty much any file. From the file level, we have noticed some scenarios where there's really, really, really large single files, like hundreds of gigs, so to speak, in some instances, that it's best to actually do our live mount option and do the recovery of the files from VM to VM, just because of the handling sometimes that has to occur in trying to incorporate all the blocks and pass it back. It could just be a little bit extensive from an operation.
What does it do in the case of a sparse file?
In the case of the sparse, I don't know exactly how that will handle.
I've seen things that either recognize them or don't, and I mean, if it doesn't, it just expands it,
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, we can create sparse files with our stubs, and I'll be honest, that's one thing I've not tested or looked at to see if we do that file recovery of a stub, if it does come back properly.
Yeah. Or if it rehydrates it in full.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's kind of the concern that, that's why you asked, I imagine.
Yeah. Not that I've ever been burned by something that does that, but.
If the VM is in a content and media store in a backup, possibly even on tape somewhere, does that then all automatically restore it, put it somewhere that is connectable by the virtual infrastructure because it's then got to be mounted and a file pulled off? Is that all that integration handled?
So if it is off on tape, then yes, we're going to actually end up caching that VM back inside the media agent so we can do those operations. Because really what we're doing here is we're creating a live index of the files inside that VM using the VDDK toolset and our appliance, right? So we're kind of looking through everything in that direction by leveraging our virtual server agent to do that orchestration.
So you can search the index, find the file, where that file is, anywhere in your content store, which is hopefully online. Obviously, if someone's taken a tape out and put it on a shelf, that wouldn't work. But if it's anywhere online, you can suck that data back in and put it in the right place to be able to restore it.
So the one caveat is if we're talking about abstracting into the VM, you at least have to know a time range of what you're looking at. You can't just do a blank search because the indexing inside the VM isn't necessarily from day one to day infinity, give me all copies of don.txt or,
why not?
Whatever it might be.
I want to really find don.txt. But to that point, you're saying if you're restoring a small file, it's no problem. You can use this thing; it works fine.
Yep.
And you're saying if you're restoring something that's hundreds of gigs in size, you shouldn't use this, and instead you should mount it up and do a copy to copy. Shouldn't, but can you? Because when I'm restoring a really, really large file, that's especially the time I want to have an agent do it, because I want to be able to go out back and look like, 23%. All right, I'll come back and check on this in a couple days. Oh, it's finished finally. As opposed to standing up a bunch of instances of things and performing the job myself, because the reason we have a backup product is so we don't have to manually do snapshots and backup and restores ourselves.
For sure. Most of the handling issues that happen are part of the VDDK and what it allows for versus our product. And a lot of that has been enhanced.
Let's blame VMware. I can work with that.
Yeah, a lot of that has been enhanced over time. I think VDDK 5.5 fixed a lot of the initial issues in trying to do single file restores of files that were greater than X size. Can you? Absolutely, yes, you can. It goes back to saying because you can.
If it breaks, it's technically not your fault.
Correct.
But don't try to restore like a 4 terabyte MP3.
And if it's multiple hundreds of megs, or I'm sorry, multiple hundreds of gigs or something like that effect, it's probably a disk file anyway. So just recover the
database.
Let's use the VSA and recover the entire disk potentially, right?
I've seen hundreds of gig text files. Don't ask me why, but I have seen text files that are massive.
Yeah. Well, let me show you the other options that then further improve that ability of those large files for access and recovery, right? So that's just step one. Step two then, let's think about, all right, I want to actually have a chance to look at that VM instantly. Whether it lives on a snapshot or if it's down here in our content store, I'm going to go ahead and label it. Remember, if we remember back to our initial, the content store is any of that disk, cloud, blah, blah, blah location that we manage that has data that we've protected in it, right? So this is our content store, deduplicated, etc., down on disk. I now want to restore that virtual machine that is right here live. Maybe this is VM Prime now because it's been corrupted or changed. I want to take that instance that's stored in my content store, and I want to look at all the files from that current state from, say, yesterday or 3 days ago. But I don't, because the VM is huge, like you say, it's a database server, I don't want to wait for hours or an hour, or whatever my infrastructure allows for that data to be piped back into my ESX server. So how can I do that quickly? Well, we do what we call the live mount. So this is the portion that really allows us to put an NFS wrapper on top of that content store. I'm just drawing this for simplicity's sake here. We put an NFS wrapper that goes around our content store so that our ESX server can address it as a data store. Once that happens, and we really do that specifically or explicitly on every call to allow this VM to be mounted and available inside of ESX from that point in time. I can now go through and actually read and look at anything that's that state of that virtual machine looked like, copy files out. It's a live state VM essentially at that point, right? And I can take my information out.
So is this in some sort of browser in your product? So that way, if I want to select multiple files, I can do it that way, or?
Yeah, so either through our web console or through our GUI itself, you can execute on the live recovery. Live
Can we see it?
Yeah, sure.
I'm just working hard.
Yeah, I mean, on a similar thing, I wouldn't mind even seeing just, obviously, you've got this big content store which you can do searching and legal discovery, and if somebody starts stealing company data and you want to find out the first emails that were sent between so-and-so and so-and-so, I gather that your product does that. Is that all part of this big search engine that you can just find stuff in your content store?
So say that one more time. I was multitasking, I missed the first half, my apologies.
You've got this big content store, lots of data. It's not just about storing VMs, but anything from images, photographic images to emails to database, all that kind of stuff. You've obviously got a super duper search engine that can search through all of that. Searching for a VM file, is it pretty much the same thing as if you were searching somebody's email archive to find out when they started nicking company data, for instance? Is it all the same kind of thing?
Yeah, basically it's a similar mechanism or operation for finding that data.
Because I know it's virtualization field day, but it seems to me a good thing of the whole CommVault product is once you've sucked in all this data, it's there, so you can do a lot more with it than just backup and restores, but legal discovery and compliance and searching and pruning off data. I mean, if you've got Windows file servers, that data just grows because people never delete anything. You could search for stuff that's older than 3 years and then get rid of it, kind of thing.
Right. Correct. So yeah, those are all very similar, and even if that Windows file server was a virtual machine or not, we could even still do things like some of the archiving management against it and show what's in an archive, what's active and live, when all those different processes occur.
And you can search across all of that.
Correct. So
Nice to see.
you asked for restore options here, right? So as you can see, we can restore full virtual machine files. This is the point I was talking about large files. Maybe it's a database. Maybe I just attach that as a disk to another VM image. Just different options you have for how you restore. If we choose the full virtual machine restore, I'm going to go ahead and make this larger. Going back to our lab. Aha. Give this a second here. What this is going to do is it's going to pop up my virtual machines. And it's just pulling the index for the virtual machines on this copy. What I might do is choose a different one. Let that continue on. And let's choose... Oh no, I did it that level. There we go. I just didn't wait long enough. All right. So I've got a bronze VM02 here that you see, and I've got a SUSE Linux virtual machine. Let's just choose this guy. Recover all selected. Oh, give it 1 second.
So is there no status bar or anything there?
Well, what this is doing is just simply bringing back the indexing detail from our media agent. It's probably been a couple months since I've looked through, or since anyone on our PM. We did this lab was all developed for VMworld, and so it's just been sitting there kind of running in the background. So our processes that prune off indexes that are based on time, and so it just takes a minute to pull it back from the disk to have it populate. So we look at our bronze VM here. Let's just go ahead and we'll select this whole thing, and then from here we see our options, where I was going to go with this next, right? So I can restore my virtual machine. I can do a live mount. I can redirect my writes if I want to a different data store. If I check this box right here, and you can see the different options I can choose for where I want my writes to occur as I'm doing a restore, I can mount it up from my content store. I can then, once I have it mounted up, vMotion it, which basically means I'm going to provide full access rights, power it on the moment it comes live and on board, choose exactly what location I want to restore it to, and as soon as it's being mounted up, I can choose to either vMotion it to whatever data store I want it to be at, or I can just let it stay where it's at as I just browse the files and then, of course, power it down when I'm done. So from a recovery perspective, it's not like you're doing a different task or technique. This is the same, just along the lines of doing a standard file or VM level restore. I'm just enabling now at the bottom that I want to restore this virtual machine with live recovery, mount it up, do all the migration mechanisms, whatnot, through my actual restore window. So again, I know it is another checkbox in our restore option, but it's what enables all these different feature sets. Make sense? Is that what you wanted to see?
So does it use NFS or something?
What we're really doing here is, like I say, you're getting an NFS layer that we've developed.
Okay.
We call it 3DFS. If you ever look inside of our logs, that basically gives us that ability to mount our backup store as a NFS store inside of VMware. And then that allows us to do that streaming, vMotion away from it. You can obviously do this from a snapshot instantaneously by just mounting up that point in time. But if it's sitting on our backup repository, or even better yet, what if I've now replicated this to a DR location, and now I want to start talking about lighting up machines because of a DR need or a test need or whatever it might be. I can do the same sort of recovery mechanism at that secondary site to a different set of ESX servers.
Does mounting the NFS happen kind of automatically because of the integration?
It's all processized inside of our calls, yeah.
Okay.
So you as a customer, all you have to do is click that box, choose what you want to do, and away it goes.
So because obviously backup and recovery, a number of other companies do a similar thing. Is your unique selling point for this not necessarily that you do the recovery via NFS, but it's because you've got a great content store, it's far easier to find that information, and wherever it is, you can pull it back, not just from a single backup target.
Yeah, correct. So it's not just about, again, it's not just about backup and recovery, but we want to make sure that, you hear customers talk about, well, we'll buy a best-of-breed solution for what our need is. And what ends up happening is they have a multitude of best-of-breed solutions that provide different facets and needs. We take a look at the market as a whole. It's like, okay, we want to ensure that we can give the ability to find your data, manage that life cycle, provide an understanding of what's actually occurring inside of those compute environments inside the hypervisors, but still make sure we're also providing the real value-add solutions like mounting directly from your backup store, instant access while it does its vMotion operation and provides that recovery copy. So we're always, and that's part of the reason from an engineering and development perspective and a product management perspective at CommVault, we're always trying to find these kind of things that we can either improve upon that our competitors either don't do, or maybe they do and would make sense to have a part of our platform, and ensure that we're continuing to progress our solution as customer need and ask is there.
And I suppose this virtualization restore is just one thing, but you're backing up file data, you're backing up physical servers, laptops, whatever. So having that all in the same content store is obviously...
and throw out RDMs. What if I'm still using an RDM context in my virtual machine? How do I protect that? Great. Not for us, if you want to do snapshots, we'll do snapshots. You want to do streaming backups, just like we would a standard physical server?
Just one thing, not specific to virtualization, not specific to some of these things, but long time archival of information to throw into like Glacier or S3, since S3 is actually cheaper than Glacier at this point, say, all right, well, we're just going to archive it out there. We paid to get it there, but once it's sitting there, then if we need to roll back to something that's ancient, and then we just maintain a local metadata repository.
Bingo. So that's the other... So 10 years ago...
Cloud story.
Yeah, 10 years ago, that was a huge differentiator, and really still is, but it kind of gets lost in all the other neat things that we've built from. But that is, you can go from one storage repository to the next. So as long as we can support the writing and reading from it, you can always consolidate and upgrade and maneuver back and forth and make your choices and decisions as you grow. I would always say that if they ever come up with holographic storage that makes sense, that 100 times what you see today or whatever it might be, the next technology, great. We'll be able to support your consolidation into that once we can support a write into that new storage tier. So from the recovery perspective, then the last component I do want to talk about is the whole Lightsink idea. So imagine that we are replicating our backup data from site A to site B. We can also set up an actual orchestrated process that automates a restore of change blocks on the secondary side, different ESX server, so that you can keep those virtual machines in sync. So think about it this way. Remember those 90% of VMs that only have a SLA for 24-hour protection? Well, if I back them up once every 24 hours, but I actually want a faster or a more well-defined available DR solution, I can accelerate the protection of that because I'm always doing change block tracking. It's a delta block movement through our infrastructure. The only challenge there is VDDK 5.5 by itself, and here's one of those core differentiators, won't allow you to do a change block tracking restore in another vCenter or another ESX server. We can. We've taken that information, made it a part of our metadata, so we can make that data portable across the location. So now for those servers, if I want them to be available at a 4 or 8 hour time frame, as long as I back them up every 4 to 8 hours, I can then replicate, deduped, delta only, and replay those restores, only tracking out the changes, the deltas, and not restamping down that whole entire virtual machine. Again, better enabling that disaster recovery sort of plan for a customer. All right, any questions? I can show the recovery options. We have a video for it. If you guys want it, I can give it to you too. Leave it behind later. But there is a video for it. Instead of wasting our time there, we'll move on.
I had a quick question. When you're doing the VM search for protection, was it, you said by name, and were there any other attributes to search by besides, I mean, what if you have an environment with the horrible naming convention and
What about tags?
tagging, annotations? And
Sure. Let me see if I can actually pull this thing up then. Because the VMware rules themselves are, let me properties. That. VM filters, that's what I was looking for. Add. So, this is the filter thing I was fighting to try to find last time. I was clicking on the wrong one. Isn't it fun how when you're in front of people that your mind just blanks on some of the easiest things that you've been doing for years? So in this case, you can see I can add multiple rules here, right? So I can make it as granular as I like. My rule pattern, host, data store, guest OS, DNS name, or I can even go in and do a browse like I was showing before, where we look at all the different criteria that we're looking at.
So you could select an entire folder? Do you have to go through and still click each VM?
Yeah, so I don't believe the folder construct, let me see here.
So let's say I have a bunch of VMs and I have tags and I want to find, you know, like she said, naming convention is horrible. I want to find a VM that's part of my financial services group. What would I do?
If
I have him tagged in vCenter, so I should be able to at least, or in a folder, I should be able to go in and find them, right?
Yeah, I don't know if the folder actually shows out here inside of our, and that's what I was trying to look at here. I don't think the folder, I know the tags, we don't get that low level yet. Okay, so we do have folders, yes, but I'm not, well, let me select these guys, let me see. I don't know if it lets me actually select that entire folder as the selection criteria. Let me see here. Yeah, folder equals, there we go.
Nice.
So I can choose that folder. I haven't gone through all the different annotations here that we can actually choose. But as you can see, it can be in the folder with a certain naming point. We haven't gotten to the level of tags in pulling that back and how we're going to actually separate. There are some challenges to doing it in that way too, right? So if I need to snap, if I need the high level of recovery and I want to do snapshots, I could potentially have a whole slew of VMs that are spread across multiple data stores across my infrastructure. So in some cases that can cause a bigger challenge than what you were initially trying to solve. So there does have to be some thought initially when you're defining these policies, just to make sure that you're not having technologies, kind of trample on one another for a negative output. Okay. Does that give you kind of the view of how you can create these rules and discover the different VMs inside of these different clients? Better? Okay. Good. So I showed you guys archiving. You guys saw already in the opening kind of what we can do from an archive perspective. I think you guys also get what we're doing there, moving into different data stores. This sort of technology and how we can mount from NFS allows us to pull things back up. That's pretty straightforward and easy. I guess.